from areas that were known within the Muslim world, but came via the scholars from the Indonesian archipelago. And I think people like Sheikh Yusuf, like Tuan Guru, basically were the conveyors, were the carriers, were the channels via which these came. So we have, for example, a Samarkandi. Interestingly, I went to Ahmad David in the 1990s, met up with late 1980s rather, met up with him, and he showed me this manuscript on Abu Layth Samarkandi. Of course, as we can see, 983 he died, but it was in circulation. And this is partly because of Aqidah text, a theological text that was circulating, that were very informative and inspiring and so on. That was translated to Arabic Afrikaans in 1910. And of course it had been circulating in the archipelago, but it found its way to the Cape. And as a result of that, I did some studies on it, not just on that, but on other texts of Abu Layth Samarkandi in Holland. So, but it took me on a different journey, and as a result, I was able to connect these texts. But that was my personal. But there are others basically who realized that Al-Ghazali's writings were also filtering into our communities through this sort of family of manuscripts that we found. So you have Sheikh Yusuf, Zubdat al-Asrar, that Suleiman Dango translated to English, the Sirr al-Asrar that basically is available. Then we have Al-Palembani, a great contributor to intellectual stimulation in the archipelago. His Sayra Salikin, copies are found here. His Al-Bidayah Hidayah, copies are also found in the Cape. I mean, what rich material is not there? We have it. Although there might be small numbers, but the point of the matter is the mere fact that they are there shows that there has been an interest in it. And the same with Sabil al-Muhtadin, Tuhfat al-Raghibin. These texts are all sort of around. And what we see on our left in these, that what they call insider, outsider, the outsiders were contributing towards the insider's knowledge, and the insider took that knowledge and brought it to the Cape. So there's this sort of circular movement of sort of information. This is another way of sort of looking at it. For example, Sirat al-Mustaqim. Sorry, I'm not giving translations of these texts, but basically Ar-Ranari, for example, as you might know, Consul General, as one of the major intellectual figures in the Indonesian archipelago. And his influence is filtered down through Asinkili and then Al-Makassari. And we are basically the bearers of some of that in different ways and at different times. Of course, like we said, we sort of don't want to go, this is around, and it's a picture of him, whether he looked like that or no, we would not really know. But let me try to wind up, because I know I've really gone over time. But let me come more to Sheikh Yusuf. We mentioned him earlier on. He remains one of our iconic figures. Then he was followed by Tuan Guru, Imam Abdullah ibn Qadi Abd Salam. And then there were others like Sheikh Awagir Effendi, Abdul Rahman Al Iraqi, Tal Khamildin, and of course Sheikh Ismail Hanif. Sheikh Ismail Hanif was one of those very sort of inspirational, charismatic individuals who contributed towards the Arabic Afrikaans genre of literature towards the end of his life, and after him nobody else has written. So he remains one of those important figures in our Muslim history. Now these are some of the books that have appeared, and just as a footnote, I'm busy with an annotated bibliography on Sheikh Yusuf's works, written by others and so on, running almost into 200 pages. Very interesting, of course, online works, published works and so forth, in Bahasa, in other languages, with I hope just to serve again as another guide to future researchers. So, having said that, these are samples, again from the book, the Sirr al-Asrar, as we had said, has also been translated into English by Suleiman Dango. The book we mentioned earlier on, we're not going to, what I just want to share with you and end off with is the fact that I've went through the two catalogs and tried to identify which were the manuscripts that are around that are not found sort of elsewhere. And so if we look just on the first column, Sifat Dua Puluh, which of course now is very popular, and that has been making its rounds. We had one of the collector, or one of the families had one manuscript. Then I came across another family who had also another copy. So I would like to compare if it's the same, because as you know, different scribes, different copiers, so there might be differences. Another interesting text is Hukum Aqli, very popular too, which we came to know, of course, through our, because I mean, we never had a chance to basically look at these, but it says much, and that's why we need to reinterrogate, re-look at these. The Barahin by Sanusi, via in the Indonesian archipelago, very important contribution, and that needs to be looked at, and so forth. So we can go through the others. Again, I'm not going to go to all, but maybe I should just add one more. I wanted to just go to, just towards the end of this. I thought I right at the end, Sharh Lima, what's the title now? I get it now. Yeah, okay, so the full title there, but again, another interesting one that has been circulating quite widely at the Cape. Sanusi is, of course, we know Sanusi comes from North Africa, and his writings found its way to Indonesian archipelago, to the Cape, and back, so to speak, via Makkah, because people who went on pilgrimage normally took these texts and say, hey, we also have this text, you know, is it connected? And of course, meeting up with the Indonesians who came on Hajj, that is also where the sort of connection is to be and was. And this is sort of the, perhaps I need to just highlight the how these texts. Now, al-Barahin, by the way, this Hukum al-Aqli, Bidayat al-Mubtadi, Sifat Dua Puluh, and Atiyat al-Rahman, all of them are subsections and related to al-Barahin. So now it's al-Barahin, that is the mother of all proofs. This is the title of the text. Basically, then is indeed the mother, and it gave birth to all of these subtexts that you basically find in the second column. So, fascinating developments, I think, intellectually, and for me, you know, having just sort of trying to make all the connections, but they are important. And this is just another way of trying to capture the transfers of knowledge from Sanusi to his students in North Africa, students in Mecca and Medina, and then in the Malay archipelago world, basically to them, to South Asia, and then of course the East African coast, which we shouldn't forget, right up to northern Mozambique. There has also been the transference of these very books, and more studies need to be made in that regard. I just went back to Sifat Dua Puluh, very interesting publication by a Malaysian scholar who tried to look at these in his particular study. Let me just come to the very last, again I'm now skipping all the others, is the issue of Arabic Afrikaans that we are so familiar with. Now, like we said, what has happened over the years is that at some early point, in terms of timeline, when we think back of our early presentation, the 18th century was a period when most of the texts were in Malayo, or Ajami texts, written in Malayo. But from 19th century onward, we find this linguistic change. Arabic Afrikaans comes on board, and this is how Arabic Afrikaans becomes a popular sort of language, so to speak, within the Malay community and other slaves as such, and in this way made its way to becoming what it became. And so, as a result of that, of course, Al-Qawl al-Matin is said to be the first such text. There has been a debate. In fact, if you go to a journal for Islamic Studies, Ahmad Davids and this other scholar had a debate about whether this was the first or not. But an interesting sort of issue to take up. This is a cyclo-style text. And then, of course, as I said, I made mention of this particular issue with Davids and Professor Weiss, that's his name, who basically argued this out in this particular journal. Anyhow, Arabic Afrikaans itself is an issue that needs to be studied a bit more than what it has been, and I think it gives us a sense to what extent this community contributed in their own unconscious way, I would say,